The Department of Defense faces significant financial hurdles in the upcoming 2025-2026 fiscal year. The department has been allocated a total budget of 57 billion rand. However, 36 billion rand has been earmarked for compensation of employees. This means that a large majority of the defense budget is tied up in personal costs, leaving a smaller amount for critical operations, maintenance, as well as strategic planning. The Minister of Defence, Angie Motshekga, has acknowledged these ongoing financial constraints, and she now joins us for that conversation. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Would Minister agree that the South African National Defence Force is underfunded?
No, thank you very much, and good morning, Adrian, and good morning to your listeners, and thank you very much for having us. Indeed, we have raised it several times, even before the budget process, to say the underfunding of the Defence Force, it has become very critical. It's a major existential problem for the department. Treasury is aware, Cabinet is aware, but also Parliament has been assisting us to engage with the different policy units or committees that deal with the budget or appropriation committee to say what they appropriate for defense is just inadequate.
Yeah. Is Minister able to share with us by how much is the South African National Defence Force underfunded?
No, it's hugely underfunded because if from the estimations of the force, if we are to be at the levels where we need to be, they say the underfunding goes close to 30 billion. But what we are saying, we'll not be able to spend 30 billion at a time. If we could be relieved with 10 billion moving towards 30 billion, so that we also have a phased process of even spending what could be allocated. But the fundamental thing that we're raising as defense is that the baseline has to be increased. The baseline is about 70, it's below 1% of the GDP. And what we are really appealing for is that we should be given a baseline of 1.5, which then will stabilize the system with plans to improve up to 2% of the GDP. So what we need now as we negotiate for the baseline to be lifted is to be given money to plug in the holes that are gaping and which are threatening the well-being of the department.
Yeah, and with that said, and what has now been shared also with departments and South Africans in general, the Deputy Minister of Defence argues that with the money that is not being spent on the South African National Defence Force, it has an impact on its ability to defend the country. And then remember the remarks of Lieutenant General Nchaveni Maphala during one of the funerals of the SANDF soldiers from the DRC. Said that Mickey Mouse spoke about that they've turned the military into a Mickey Mouse Defence Force. And once again, this also speaks to the confidence that South Africans would then have in the South African Military Defence Force, or the lack thereof.
But just go back to what the Deputy Minister has said, and I've said repeatedly, we are currently not sunk, we are floating, but we need to move forward and to be able to cope with the changing geopolitical environment of defense. And that's what we need to do. But to just say that indeed nothing is happening the way he said, and I've corrected him many times to say, we go to briefings with him. I visit sites with him. We went to the military, and I was with him when I asked the chief of the military to say, in terms of our provision, where are we? He said it's 50%, Minister. For now, we can still continue to survive, but we can't afford to go lower. And that's why we're saying to avoid a situation where we go lower than the current state where we are, where we think we are able to do the work that we need to do, we should not risk having any provisions which are lower. And I've said that many times to correct what the Deputy Minister is saying. The SG, indeed, I understand his frustrations. We're supposed to have improved Military One Hospital, which has become also a sore point, but that section doesn't have money to improve. It needs 1.4 billion, which is not there in their budget. And I think it is frustrations about some of the challenges that are there. I've raised with him the Mickey Mouse. He really apologized most sincerely, and he just thought he said he was overwhelmed and other things, but Indeed, there are challenges and we're not denying them. And that's why we keep on really engaging with Treasury to say we cannot afford any decline beyond where we are. It could be dangerous. As much as we're able to sustain that which we're supposed to do, we can't go lower than this, and hence the pressure. And I think the support we're getting from Parliament that the baseline of defense has to be improved beyond the 0.8% that we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. One of the other ones is looking at this budget, nearly 64% of the allocated budget going to compensation of employees. Help us make sense of this, Minister, how so much money would be spent on staff.
Well, it's compensation of employees. Defense, it's a labor-intensive. We have more than 75,000 soldiers, which is what we need, and we need more than that. We do all emergency, we do border patrol, so we still need even more. But because we're defunded, you will not be able to cut from CEO because those people are already there. And which means, unfortunately, in some of the critical areas, we've had to hold back. And that's why the balance is not right. Ideally, for a department like defense, it would be easier to have 60% and 40% your prime mission equipment. But now, because you can't cut on people who are already there, which you need in any case, then you find yourself having this very imbalance. You will know, Adrian, that most of our equipment is not, we don't have even enough equipment in terms of enough planes, enough ships for the sea. We just have enough to survive, but we need more resources. But the 60% for labor, Department of Defense is a labor-intensive department. So, yeah, I think it's not out of line, bearing in mind that it's a labor-intensive department.
Yeah, but again, the argument was that at a very senior level, it is actually bloated. So the problem is more with the structure of the Defence Force, because at a senior level, it is bloated. I remember even the department coming up with the mobility and exit mechanism and employee-initiated severance packages to try and fix what is bloated there at the top.
It's not so much the bloating, it's the age bulge, which is normally in most departments, that with time, you find that we have an age bulge with very few people able to enter the system because we've not been recruiting. And to deal with the age bulge is to encourage those that are older, say around 55 and over, to really exit so that we're able to attract young people. Again, defense really needs young, fit people to really resource the center. So it's not really over-bloating, it's the age bulge that we're trying to deal with.
Okay, then let's speak, Minister, about the long-term financial implications of ongoing or future regional deployments for the South African National Defence Force.
You know, Adrian, we recently went to Berlin to the UN conference on peacekeeping, where more than 100 ministers went there to say what are our pledges moving forward. Knowing our financial situation, we decided to make, because we had to make pledges, we decided to make pledges which would require less resources on our part. We had to pledge around, because on our strengths, which would not compromise us any further. We deployed, or we committed towards the training of generals, which we think we are good at, around gender training to make sure that, because we're also a leading country, but also around sharing equipment, as also we think we have equipment which can be fruitfully used in peacekeeping processes. So we've been very careful to pledge this time, bearing in mind what our constraints are, so that moving forward, as soon as we recover, we will be able to again pledge in terms of the resources. So we continue to commit ourselves to peace in the region, in the continent, but in the world, and have made those pledges, which we thought were not too much costing us too much, which are not financially heavy for us, but we are going to continue to participate in peacekeeping processes in terms of our needs, our means, and our ability.
Yeah, needs, means, and ability of the South African National Defence Force. With the decision that was taken, of course, it was not a South African decision, with the withdrawal of the SAMI DRC. Does it leave the South African National Defence Force being perceived as much weaker than what it was maybe 10 years ago?
It's perceived by South Africans, I must say. You speak to anybody in the United Nations, we're a very valued a country in terms of peacekeeping because of our experience. We've been in more than 30 peacekeeping missions in the world, from Burundi to everywhere else. So we are regarded quite well because we've been doing extremely well. The Summit DRC deployment is a SADC deployment. So even when resources were running short, they were not running short from South African part, because when you go to the deployment, you pledge the resources you will bring, and all the resources that we had pledged, we had brought to the semi-DRC. So it was not a shortcoming on our part, but it could have been, if there were problems, there would have been SADC problems, not South African problems. So we're still highly regarded, we're still highly valued from all forums. Through SADC, United Nations always feels that if as South African we don't participate, the mission will not really be strong and good enough. So we're well regarded, and the incidents in the DRC were unfortunate, where we lost our soldiers, but we continue to be a well regarded and well respected defense force in the continent, but also in the world.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that South Africans have this lack of confidence in the South African National Defence Force, and even to protect our borders, is looking at how porous the borders are. Right now, we're faced with a situation with the undocumented foreign nationals, South Africans now taking it upon themselves to even blocking them from accessing health care. Has Minister had any conversation at all with intelligence if there is any possible threat of a civil unrest among South Africans as well as foreign nationals?
No, actually, civil unrest will be our biggest threat in the country because of a number of factors. Your porous borders, you're quite correct, high levels of unemployment and poverty, and unengaged young people do present a very serious threat to the security of the country. In terms of the porousness of our borders, we agreed, and that's why there's a border management committee which is convened not by defense, but we are part of it as defense. It's convened by Department of Home Affairs. We work with police. We are part of the border management committees or structure. But you're quite correct that the porousness of our borders is a serious threat, and it's something that we, under the leadership of the Minister of Home Affairs, are constantly engaging with. So the intelligence agencies of the police, of the military, but also of the surrounding countries where we have lots of immigrants, exchange notes on an ongoing basis. But you're quite correct, it is a very unhealthy situation which we have to be able to arrest. But this is not dependent on us alone. Yeah. It's a joint activity, yeah.
And some people are saying that if you look at those simmering tensions, that they could even fuel civil unrest based on other matters. As an example, you have today the Daily News has an article that they're reporting on this morning about potential civil unrest that would be taking place in KwaZulu-Natal. There it is, we're showing it now to our viewers. Tensions could lead to civil unrest. And this is, though, on the defense of Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the Lieutenant General of the Provincial Police Commissioner in KwaZulu-Natal. Has the Defence Force picked up anything as yet at this particular point that could be a problem?
No, General Adrian, our biggest threat from the military intelligence in our country is internal unrest like we had in KZN. Because there's also of simmering problems which are created not only by a specific incident, which that makes the country volatile, your poverty rates, unemployment rates, and just general discontent amongst people. It's really a very dangerous environment which anything can ignite it. So that is always flagged as our major threat as compared to external countries attacking us, but it's having problems internally. I was with the intelligence head and the chief of the defense on Friday with the deputies, and they did flag internal unrest as a potential threat. And that's why there's constant exchange of information between the police, your state security agency, and our military intelligence, just to really monitor what we think is indeed a major potential threat for the country.
Yeah. Does the tensions around Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi also fuel that?
It will be. We have not analyzed the current situation, because the last time I had an analysis from military intelligence, it was on Friday, but we meet weekly, and I'm sure when we meet, and again this week we're very pleased because we had to go to Parliament, we get weekly briefings. It would have come up, and I do expect that the head of military intelligence will be able to share information if there are threats. But for now, it has not come to the table in terms of our analysis, but I'm sure between the different intelligence agencies in the country, they would have picked that up and analyzed and maybe develop plans around it.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Angie Motshekga is the Minister of Defence and Military Veterans.